Take it away, Glenna.
Hey everyone, I am just trying to get my screen shared, so bear with me for a second because now it's making me enter a password.
Yeah, I see it's telling me that the screen is sharing. There we go. Go for it.
Lots of technical difficulty this weekend, switching computers around. So good morning everyone. Happy to be joining you here today. My name is Glenna Gannon. I am an assistant professor of sustainable food systems at the Institute of Agriculture, Natural Resources and Extension. I'm also here with my friend and colleague, Heidi Rader, and she will be co-presenting with me today. And just briefly, I'd like to make the land acknowledgement, just to say that I recognize that we are living and working on the traditional homelands of the Lower Tanana and Dena'ina peoples, and we are grateful to be here. So what we're going to talk to you about today is the vegetable variety trials at the Agriculture and Forestry Experiment Station and the outreach component of research within the Institute of Agriculture, Natural Resources and Extension. So I'm probably going to start using a few acronyms. One of them is IANRI, so that's to what I just referred. And then CES is Cooperative Extension Service. So we're all part of one big unit at UAF. There's a merger a few years ago. So now we are the Institute of Agriculture, Natural Resources and Extension. Sorry, I just realized my video wasn't started. So hi, good morning, everyone. Oops, I will go back one. So I've got this slide up, and the reason I wanted to share this is because it's just providing a little context for why we do vegetable variety trials. So in Alaska, you know, many of you know because you're probably gardeners or know a gardener or a farmer.
Hey Glenna, I don't know if anyone can hear you. I don't think, check the chat.
Yeah, I see. This is Brian, moderator. I hear you fine. I'm trying to figure out why others cannot hear.
One of the issues I've had is if you tried joining the embedded video in Whova, you might want to log out or leave the session and then try again and make sure you join with computer audio. I had that issue.
Yeah, and the other, just to add to that, I have found that Whova wants us to use Google Chrome, and I guess that makes it a better system. So why don't we just we'll take a pause here, you know, for 30 seconds and let people log out and log back in, because I was not aware that people are having problems, and we really would like Glenna to start from the top because several people have missed out. Oh wow, yeah, technology difficulties. Oh, okay, so bear with it, everybody. We'll be here in just the 20 seconds or go, and we'll just go with that. And again, if people can't hear again later on, these sessions are being recorded, and so I know the best thing is you want to hear it live and real as it's happening, but there is a backup plan also, and for those who could not attend this session entirely, there will be recordings available in the future. So I'll send it back to you, Glenna. Let's from the top. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Hopefully people were able to get back in. Yeah. Okay, so for folks who weren't able to hear, I'm just going to run over some of these acronyms again real quick so people don't get confused. So I'll be referring to IANRI, so that's the Institute of Agricultural, Natural Resources and Extension. It's the unit that both Heidi and I work for at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. So when I'm referring to IANRI or Cooperative Extension or CES, that's what I mean. So again, I have this slide up just because I'm trying to give you guys a sense of the context for the variety trials. Alaska has had, you know, a long history of being a rather cold state, you know, since the end of the last ice age, and this has been challenging for many folks who want to grow crops for agricultural purposes. But this is changing. Climate modeling is forecasting for pretty dramatic changes in the next 100 years for Alaska's climate, as you can see here on these projected climate maps. And this was done by a team of researchers at the Scenarios Network for Alaska and Arctic Planning at UAF, also known as SNAP. And so their website's at the bottom, and they created a really wonderful online garden helper tool for those of you who are interested in growing plants. You can actually select by community and get a lot of fine-grained detail about first and last frost dates. But you know, their research is really telling us, along with our empirical evidence, you know, based on growing crops, that things are changing for our climate. And that's why it's important for us to do these trials, along with the fact that Alaska is rather food insecure. So you've heard a lot of people talk about that 95% of food importation into Alaska, and the different ways in which we are food insecure. So this is the impetus for the variety trials. Heidi, did you want to take this one, or should I keep going?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Hi, I'm Heidi Rader. I'm an associate professor of extension and worked with Glenna for a long time, and happy to work with her now as a new faculty member. So this was kind of variety trials had been held at the Georgeson Botanical Garden for quite a number of years, and then due to budget cuts and you know, loss of staff and whatnot, they had stopped for about 7 years, and 2017 had the opportunity to start them. So, and this came at a time too, I'll talk more about this later, but when I was also developing an app called Grow and Tell. Anybody heard of that app? Just mention it in the chat. And basically, you know, variety trials are great, but unfortunately, you know, our state is so big, they only make a small dent in kind of evaluating all of the varieties we have. And so Grow and Tell is really a citizen science project and a way to vastly expand what we can do in terms of variety trials. So anyways, yeah, I kind of restarted it and then was able to hire Glenna, and now she's kind of taking the ball and running with it. So I'm really excited to see that.
Thanks, Heidi.
Yeah,
so the experiment stations, for those of you who don't know, as Heidi mentioned, we can't hit the whole state. Of course, it's massive, and we have, I think, 6 different you know, ecological zones within the state, and then the many thousands of microclimates within those zones. So the trials, as they are currently conducted, are at the Fairbanks Agriculture and Forestry Experiment Station. That's located at the Fairbanks farm. Many of you may be familiar with that, as well as the Matanuska Experiment Station. Again, many of you are probably familiar with that farm and that resource down there. And so we are on this longitudinal bisect, and in, you know, these 2 farms serve very different communities and different growing zones. So by replicating the trials in these 2 places, we can get a much better sense of what's appropriate for interior Alaska versus what's you know, doing better and yielding better in the south central part of Alaska. So we do have multi-locational trials, and in the next few years, I'm hoping to really ramp this up and try and collaborate with some different folks on the Kenai Peninsula and Southeast Alaska to try and extend these trials so we can get a better sense of what's growing well where, and which food crops have the highest potential for success, as well as ones that might be a valuable for market crop. So how do we decide what to trial? This is an ongoing process. In 2017, as Heidi mentioned, when we restarted the trials, we initially did this survey, and individuals were allowed or able to select crops that were important to them, and in rank order, we were able to see what's important to folks. And granted, I think that survey was just for interior Alaska. And so the
Oh,
ones.
I can talk a little bit about it if you want.
Yeah.
No, it was statewide, but
Oh,
you know, with obviously we're trialing in the interior, and just a quick note of how we really focused on, you know, you can see things like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage were some of the top picks, but we really wanted to focus on things that are a little bit more borderline, that maybe didn't grow particularly well in the past, and you know, things like beans. Some of these other, you know, Brussels sprouts is quite a long season type crop, so that as our growing seasons change, those are things that become more and more realistic. And corn in particular is one of those that everybody's excited about growing, and usually is pretty finicky, but seems like it's getting to be more reliable. So
yeah, and I'll add that we're trialing corn here in Fairbanks, but that is not a crop that's been replicated in Palmer Matsu, largely because of wind damage. There's been challenges with that repeatedly. So yeah, we are replicating most of these formerly marginal crops and then some of the old standards to try and get a better sense of which varieties that are commercially available now, because some of the old standards that were recommended to Alaska growers are no longer available. So we're trying to update that information. And I'll just put in a quick plug that at the bottom of your screen, you can see a short web link. If you copy that and go to that survey, that is the updated survey that's helping us decide which crops to grow in the future. And you can indicate which community you're from too, and that'll give us a better sense of maybe by region, what kinds of things we should focus on trialing in the future. I think maybe I can get some help dumping these links into the chat if possible. And if not, we'll make sure that they're available to folks.
Lena, did you send those to Brian by chance ahead of time?
I just added your veg survey one.
Oh,
thank you. Okay, thanks, Brian. Okay, so we'll keep it moving here. So here is a list of the things that we've trialed from 2017 to 2020. So this last summer, so when we have replicated trials and unreplicated trials, what we mean is with the replicated trials, there's been at least 3 plots per trial. So we have replication and can make more statistically informed conclusions about how well the crops did. And unreplicated trials is our way of sort of, you know, getting a start with certain crops, seeing how they do, and then making some decisions from there about whether or not we're going to continue trialing them in the future. And the other thing I'll just add is typically if we do an unreplicated crop, you'll see that from 2018 to 2019, we added some of those crops, but then like with Brussels sprouts, they didn't do quite well enough for us to decide that it warranted all the space required to do replicates, because it does take up a fair amount of square footage. And then also in 2020, we would have done more replicated crops. However, we were unable to get access to our greenhouse this spring due to COVID. So hoping that next spring we'll be able to operate as we'd like. So on this slide, what I really just wanted to share with you was what the results look like in our full reports. So what I'm going to share with you here in a few moments is sort of, you know, the highlights from these different crops. And I'm really giving you the information about what are the top yielding varieties, the ones that produce the most yield per square foot, and that's by pound. And also ones that tasted the best. However, there's a lot more information and there are many more varieties that we trialed than what are indicated in these upcoming slides. So just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that and encourage you to check out our trial reports from previous years. And those can be found and we'll have slides as we go that have the website information for where you can find that. Okay, so jumping right in with beets. So We've been growing beets since 2017, and I'll just also say that all of these are the results up to 2019. We have not we've not yet had the chance to get all of our data analyzed from 2020. So this is just results from 2017 to 2019, and in some cases for crops that weren't trialed in 2017, just 2018 and 19. So I guess that's a plug for stay tuned. There will be information about the 2020 growing season coming soon. So with beets, our top producers you can see here were Zeppo and Sabeto. They grew really wonderfully round, symmetrical, and tasty beets, especially Sabeto. Robin was another one that grew massive beets, and I'll just say this year I harvested one that was a 2.3 pound beet, and it was like the size, almost the size of my head. And so Robin, if left in the field, will continue to put on a lot of size, and actually that is a really lovely tasting beet. We also have Red Ace, Pablo, and Boro. So all of these, the F1 refers to the fact that these are hybridized breeds, so not heirloom. And so all of these ones that did well were hybridized. You can see here on the lower charts, this just gives you a sense of throughout the season, it's kind of at a glance of the harvest weights and then the units. So typically these lines pretty well follow each other, but you can see some differences, like with Sabeto, it was not as many units, but weighed quite a bit, so indicating that those were rather large beets. Okay, so we'll keep moving here. All right, so celery. This is Heidi getting ready to plant many trays of celery in 2018 when we started celery trials. So we found that celery is actually a really nice crop for Fairbanks. It is a heavy, it does need a lot of water. So it does need to be irrigated, but our kind of cool, consistent summer temperatures in a normal year are really nice for celery. So Tango and Marengo and Nero all did really well for us. I'd say my personal favorite is Marengo. It's not stringy, it's got a really nice crunch, it's pretty sweet. And those are Marengo celery heads down there.
And can I just interrupt a second, Glenna? I just wanted to mention, somebody asked about why we didn't trial tomatoes, and some of what we trial, it's kind of a practicality issue. So celery, there's not that many varieties of celery, so we can be pretty comprehensive in our trials. Tomatoes, oh my gosh, I mean, people easily save and develop their own varieties of tomatoes. There are just so many varieties of tomatoes. So if we wanted, we could be a solely tomato trialing endeavor. And then of course you need greenhouses, or you could trial them. You could trial them in greenhouses, you could trial them in high tunnels, field grown. So, with our very limited resources, sometimes we chose direct seeded varieties. For one, the first summer we trialed these vegetables, I found out we had funding to do this in the spring past when we could really do all the transplanting. So anyways, celery is a nice one because we can do comprehensive trials versus just a small selection of the varieties that are out there. So
yeah, thanks, Heidi. Okay, so beans, bush beans. We know beans do fairly well in Alaska. However, as we indicated before, we do have a changing climate, and there are many varieties of beans. And when we first started bush bean variety trials in 2018, I think there were 12 varieties total. So we were harvesting purple, yellow, and green, and then we reduced that down in the last few years to the top 5 yielding varieties. And again, just to add on to what Heidi was saying, part of the trials that we're selecting, or part of the crops that we're selecting, are ones that are already do well enough in Fairbanks, but maybe need to be updated in terms of recommended varieties. So as part of IANRI, our mission in part is with research, to follow up with the research, we also have the extension and outreach. And so we want to make sure that the recommendations for different varieties is up to date and reflects our current growing conditions. So you know,
Well,
no.
and also it's part of an availability issue too, where some, we used to recommend some varieties that are no longer readily available. So one of those is a good example is carrots, where a lot of people like to grow Nelson carrots. If anyone buys Pam's carrots, she used to grow Nelson carrots, and those are no longer readily available because they have kind of wispy seed tops. And so, carrots is another one we'll talk about trialing, and that's, that was a standby, and now it's no longer readily available. So that's another important reason to do trials.
Yeah, definitely. So top 3 performing varieties of beans are Rockdor, Provider, and Bountiful. Provider and Bountiful have long been used in Alaska, and they continue to be good providers. Rockdor is a yellow bean, actually, and we have a little video that we'll share with you later, and you can see what all the beans that we've trialed look like. And that one is definitely one of my new favorites. And here you have pictured Jumbo, which are really lovely bean, but they, as you can see here, they kind of, let's see, where's Jumbo? They don't produce much until a little bit later in the season. Okay, so Brussels sprouts were unreplicated trials. We did not trial Brussels sprouts in 2020 due to not being able to get them started in the greenhouse early enough. And we're finding, as we had mentioned before, as a formerly marginal crop for the interior, just due to day length. Brussels sprouts, our growing climate is pretty good for them. It's not too hot, so they don't go too bitter. However, the days to maturity for most Brussels sprouts is over 100 days. And so we didn't typically have that many frost-free days, especially up here in interior Alaska. And so now we're finding that this is a crop that has real potential in terms of reaching maturity and potentially being more readily available for market. Oops. Okay, so corn. As Heidi mentioned, everyone's excited about corn, growing corn in Alaska, and I will just say it is pretty exciting, and it gives me a huge sense of pride to be able to harvest all these giant baskets of corn in Alaska. We grew 12 different varieties of corn. And I think in 2018 there was 22. So we've limited that down to 12 that are pretty good producers here. And some of you may be aware of a variety called Yukon Chief that was actually developed here in Fairbanks, Alaska. And that variety we initially trialed, since it was an Alaskan variety of corn, and found that really our growing season was warm enough and long enough now that we could grow to maturity a lot of these sweet corns, and they didn't need to be that variety that was developed specifically for Alaska, which actually happens to be crossbred with a flint corn. And for anyone who knows corn, that tends to be pretty starchy and not all that tasty, and also produced really, really small ears that were only like 3 to 5 inches long. So as you can see here, these are really beautiful ears of corn, and there's some potential here. I will say that corn continues to be it's a resource intense crop to grow. And you can see here with this picture that has Heidi in some of our corn plots. We do grow our corn in infrared transmitting plastic. So this is a type of plastic mulch that it makes it so that infrared rays don't go through and restricts weed growth, but it does warm the soil. And so we find that makes a huge difference for corn, is this warming action in the soil. So our soils are still a little cool for corn. But with these varieties that we're selecting, they're all somewhere between 73 and 90-day varieties, and we're getting pretty good results, as you can see here. So Cafe, Legend, and Espresso and Sugar Pearl are all pretty good producers. The top 3 typically give us 2 ears of mature, what we call marketable. So we rate a lot of these by marketable and unmarketable yield. So the way we're evaluating that is, would you see this, this unit at the farmer's market? Would you sell at the farmer's market? So it might not be the perfect, supermarket, grocery store specimen, perfectly symmetrical with no flaws whatsoever, but it certainly is pretty close, and you would see it at a farmer's market. The top two for taste testing are Sugar Pearl and Sugar Buns pretty consistently. Espresso also did really well. Those three, these are all sugar enhanced varieties, and they're all extremely sweet. And so yeah, it's been a lot of fun to grow corn. And if you'd like to see results of all of the varieties that we've grown, please again go check out our publications with full information about these. So carrots, Heidi was talking a little bit about carrots. We like tomatoes, the issue that Heidi mentioned about tomatoes is there's so many varieties, and carrots are similar. There's red carrots and purple carrots and yellow carrots. And we decided to just stick with orange carrots, part of the reason being to narrow the field, but also trying to find replacements for standards like Nelson. So Heidi gave that example, and I won't go into it again too much, but now that that variety isn't commercially available in terms of you can't get the seed, we're really trying to see what varieties do well for our growing conditions and which might be a good alternative for that. So here on the bottom, you can see all of the varieties in that graph of the different cultivars that we're growing right now. And you can kind of get a sense by weight how well those different varieties stacked up against each other. Our consistent winner for pounds tends to be the Napoli and Bolero. Those ones have been really consistently performing well. And then they also are doing well in the taste tests. And I'll just add that Tucson, that variety is a really good storage carrot we've found. So we tested that one 2 months into storage last year, and that won the taste tests for that. So that's why that one, the star indicates that it does well in taste tests there. So winter squash was a preliminary trial in 2020. The winter squash is, so as we're starting to talk more about Alaska's food security, this was a trial that I was personally really excited about, because winter squash has a really great potential to improve food security when you think about per plant, the volume of food that you get off of it, and then it comes with its own storage package. It doesn't require any real processing, stores pretty easily, and you can get a lot of food off of just a couple plants. So to give you a sense of just how much, we did a preliminary of 9 varieties total, and we only planted 10 plants in the research plots per variety. And so these are just the top 5 of those 9, top 5 yielding in pounds. So just with spaghetti squash alone, we got over 850 pounds of marketable. That was the marketable yield. So there was some more that maybe weren't quite ripe and didn't get picked because they just weren't quite mature. Likewise with the rest of these varieties. One variety that I'm very excited about, and when we're talking about the ingenuity of food, is the Gete Oksomen variety, and that is the very large squash in the lower left hand of your screen that our research technician and friend Nicole is holding there. This is a Native American heirloom variety, and it has a long history of being traded up from the Miami people, and then ending up in Wisconsin and Michigan, where it is now commercially available from Baker Seeds. And this variety, I think, has a ton of potential. It's one of the best tasting squashes I've ever tried. And I will say, as an heirloom variety, it doesn't keep as well as a lot of the others, but it's fantastic. And we're really excited to see how that one does in future years for trials, especially being that this year was pretty rainy and pretty cool, and Fairbanks squash did well. And I'll just add that in terms of growing conditions, we did grow these squash in a plastic culture system. So they were under that IRT plastic to help warm the root system. And then we also used a weed barrier, a 12-foot weed barrier in between rows, just to make sure that the weeds didn't grow up and compete with the squash vines, but also that the squash plants were kept, clean and off the ground.
And
So
Glenna, there's a lot of good questions too about some
okay.
of the details, and I just wanted to say we'll include the links where the variety trial reports will be. Probably we haven't even crunched the numbers on number of fruit per plant yet, so we'll have to stay tuned for the report on that one.
Yeah, please stay tuned, and if you have questions, feel free to email me, or if we have time, we'll try and answer a couple after the presentation. The other kind of data that we collect are subjective ratings, and what this means is, rather than having a quantitative number about yield, how many units per plant, that kind of thing, we do take these ratings for each plot. And so what I'm really trying to get across here is that you can kind of at a glance see which crops might be more susceptible to pests, say, or which ones might have higher bolting sensitivities. And so this might give you the ability, by having these subjective ratings, and I'll just use the pest resistance in celery as an example. So that got a low rating because we are starting to see a lot of slugs here in interior, which is a new agricultural pest to us. Relatively new. And so what we found is celery tends to be a preferred crop of slugs. And so we did see a fair amount of slug damage on celery, whereas we didn't see much of that kind of pest pressure on any other varieties. So just to kind of overall, this is a like 10,000 foot view snapshot of the kinds of trends we saw with those subjective ratings. And again, you can see, these are taken on a scale from 1 to 9, and then you can see how different cultivars within each crop added up compared to each other, to give you a better sense of, maybe which variety is more susceptible to slug damage of those celery. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Heidi.
Thanks, Glenna. Can you advance the slides for me, please? Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about outreach. I am the Tribes Extension Agent. I've served in the Interior Alaska Tanana Chiefs Conference region for 13 years now, but I've also taken on some other projects like this one. But I still continue really to focus on the outreach aspect of it. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Lana, if you'd like to advance, please. So YouTube videos is one of the things I've done and I'm still doing. So this summer, without the ability to travel like I normally would, I did more YouTube videos. So stay tuned. There's going to be, I think, close to 10 coming out soon, and they really dovetail in with the variety trials, as well as just some growing recommendations for the various crops that we're trialing. So got one on beets, corn, beans, turnips, radishes, a couple that we aren't trialing as well. So thank you, Brian, for that link. You can check that out in the chat. But do stay tuned, as the ones I did this summer are not published yet. So, but I still have 35 out there of, a variety of other things related to gardening and farming. So, and Glenna did a couple this year as well, which should be posted shortly. Advance, please. Oh, maybe here's one of them. So I also teach the Alaska Master Gardener online course and had 40 students this fall. And of course, I love to tie in the variety trial research, because that's really the essence of what Extension does, is share research. So this has been a really great opportunity for me to share research in my outreach. Next, please. And then an additional thing I did with the outset of COVID was start a blog called It Grows in Alaska. And I've written articles for the News Miner, also published in the Tanana Chiefs Conference newsletter, and then started this blog to kind of archive those posts and make sure people who do not subscribe to the newsletter have access to those. So I've got posts on beans, corn, growing beets, carrots, a lot of the things that we're trialing. So in addition to a bunch of other posts and articles. So next, please.
I'll just jump in and say Heidi's even got recommendations for homeschooling curricula with kids as they pertain to the garden and entomology. So it's pretty varied and wonderful. You can even find some good recipes.
Thanks, Glenna. Yeah, as you know, just with our how we do things differently, I had 2 summer camps in the garden planned, and just because of COVID, weren't able to do that. So shifted gears to more of a virtual outreach mechanism, as we are all doing. In case you're not aware, Cooperative Extension Service also has tons and tons of information on growing all of these crops. So really excited that the variety trials were actually able to update some of the variety recommendations, which were, things like Yukon Chief or Nelson are just no longer either available or we wouldn't recommend. So next, please. And I mentioned this earlier, it's called the Grow and Tell app. And for all of you, wherever you live across the state and do not have an agriculture and forestry experiment station, get together with your own, community of gardeners and share what grows well for you where you live. And this is available online with Apple iPhone or with an Android, and go ahead and see what the top recommendations for various crops are where you live. And the other real advantage there too is that we're only able to trial a very small amount of vegetables and varieties that are out there. But in theory, if all the gardeners and farmers share share what they're growing, we just have a lot more information. So not perfect, but it turns out it costs a lot of money to make a mobile app. So it's good. It's as good as we had the amount of funding for.
And Heidi, maybe you want to share what gardeners can get out of it using the gardening records.
Oh yeah, so I mean, another really valuable thing for anybody to do is to basically keep their own gardening journal. And so that's what you can do with this app. If you go to the online version on your computer, you can actually download your whole journal at the end of whatever you recorded. So keeping track of what grows well for you and what you like to grow is a really wonderful exercise, and is going to be most relevant and useful for you too. So that's a great thing to do. Thanks.
Yeah, and the app is free, right?
It is free, which is why we ran out of money. Next, please. And so this is where you can go to find all of the past variety trial reports. And of course, there were trials done well before Glenna and I were trialing things, and so you'll find all of those historical, or at least some of those historical trials too. Another place is ScholarWorks at the university site that you can find really old trial information that I don't think is loaded here. But the downside of the older trials, of course, is that some of those varieties are no longer available. So just keep that in mind. And of course, climate is changing rapidly. And that's where Glenna mentioned, you mentioned the Garden Helper app. And that's a really interesting app to see where the climate has been in your region and where it's going to.
So I don't know if how are we doing on time?
We are getting pretty, oh, we've only got a couple minutes. So.
Okay, so maybe I'll skip playing this, but as Heidi mentioned, this is just, I'll give you like a sneak peek. How's that sound? Hi, my name's Glenna Gannon. I'm here at the UAF Agriculture and Forestry Experiment Station in Fairbanks, and I'm going to give a brief little synopsis of the variety trials that we're doing here at the farm, specifically about bush beans. Okay, so you can find these videos about the different varieties that we have trialed for the vegetable trials on the University of Alaska Fairbanks Cooperative Extension YouTube channel. These should be released within the next couple of days, I believe, and then so you should be able to search those, but that will be on Cooperative Extension's YouTube channel. And then Heidi has her own, and maybe Heidi, you can talk about how are those connected, or yours is completely separate from what I understand.
Oh, say that again. What's separate?
Your channel, the It Grows in Alaska channel, or
it's a playlist, so it's all, it can be, all of it should be able to be found at the UAF's Extension YouTube channel. I have a playlist, and I don't know where exactly yours will be posted there on that channel.
Okay.
So I did see a quick question I was going to answer, or a comment from Darren. Thank you. There's a lot of other people doing trials, farmers, gardeners, etc., which is great. And maybe I said something about there not being any trials in Southeast, but what I meant to say is that we aren't responsible for those trials. But in addition to Grow and Tell, farmers have really taken on some of that trialing with specialty crop grants, for example, which is awesome. And they're doing really good work. So thanks, Darren. Hi, Karen. Thanks. I think we're about out of time.
This is Brian. I think that everything's going very well. I didn't want us to stress out about to the minute kind of thing.
Oh.
Annabelle's just waiting to start, and I think it's all fine, because after Annabelle, then we go back to you, Heidi, and then everyone breaks for lunch. So if everyone's cool with it, how about, do you have like 2 minutes to wrap up or something like that? I wasn't sure how far the twin talk would go.
We're pretty close.
Pretty close. Okay, well, just
you can skip ahead on some of those slides, Glenna. I don't know if
no, just go ahead. If there's something there, because I'm trying to get your sites into the chat, and it's working. So go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so I mentioned the Master Gardener online course that I teach, and if you want to go to the next slide, Glenna. And if you want to share this one, Brian, this is a great one to share. Just if you have any gardening, farming questions, usually how extension works is you contact the person in your region. So here's a couple links where you can find who your contact is. And then also we have an online portal. It's called Ask an Expert, and that's a really great way to ask a question too, and then it'll get funneled to the right person that way too. So gardening, farming question you might have. So.
And I'll just leave those up because this is our last content slide. So I guess since we're about out of time, maybe we won't do questions to respect our other presenters. But from what I understand, people can ask us questions through the HOVA app. And you can, send messages to any of the conference presenters and participants. I will just drop in Heidi and I's emails too, just if people want to contact us directly. And with that, I guess, thank you. Heidi, do you have any last thoughts?
That's it. Thank you all for coming, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Maybe I'll see you later today.
And with that, thank you very much, Glenna and Heidi. Really a nice, dense talk chock filled with just about everything you need to know. I mean, CES is the go-to organization for getting your hands into the dirt. So much appreciated. All the websites that Heidi provided for me, I think I got them correct. If there's a typo, my apologies. But the two ladies will be willing and able to assist you in any way to make your gardening dreams or farmlands become wonderful.
We'll try.
Oh, come on, you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job. Just don't burn out, please. Don't burn out. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to now, let's see, since I'm the ultimate host here, yikes. So I'm going to mute. See, Glenna's done. And I'm going to open up for, we're going to Kotzebue. Kotzebue. I always botch the pronunciation. And we have Annabelle Aviti.
Alvite.
Avite. Yeah. And let's see. I see you. You're coming in great. Love the glasses. Wow. Look, check that out. And can you give us a snow report? Because I know you got blasted by some wicked storm that came from the northwest.
Yeah, we actually love our storms up here because it's such a small town where a lot of us walk anyway. And so snow is just part of living up here. And the drifts are amazing. And the kids get great snow sledding hills all over town. And the house rocks and rolls. And you can't see, across the street. And when it's over, it's just this glorious winter wonderland. Of course, we don't have much daylight now, but it is beautiful. The sad part is usually storms bring warmer weather. And so it's like 33, which is really not good for us. As you know, when snow and ice melts, it freezes into these god awful hard rocky lumps that are just treacherous to walk around in. But other than that, it's good. It's calm today. They've got storm surges. A lot of water will come up the edge of town. It'll break up the ice in front of town. So no one will be snow machining or doing anything out there for a while until it freezes up again. But otherwise, yeah, we love a good storm.
Oh, I'm with you on that because when it blows and rocks and rolls in Kodiak, another K-town, I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
for,
It's
it's not,
also
it's not,
safe and have nowhere to go.
yeah, and it's not for everybody. I feel bad for the ones who say, "Oh man, I can't wait to get out of this place because I want to be where it's, like Bali or Phoenix or something like that." But no, we're great. So let's go with your talk. If you're ready to share your screen, everyone, I give you
Yeah.
Annabelle.
Okay, yeah. Share my screen. We practiced that. Let me see if I can do that again. Share screen, and I'm not sure where I'm supposed to go for it, Brian. It doesn't look like the same window we looked at during practice. Oh,
Okay.
see, hang on.
Yeah, it might be the connection. Oh, I see something popping through. There you go. Go for it.
Oh, okay, great. So wonderful. Wow, this is really amazing. I've never been the speaker before, so it's kind of creepy. And it's great to watch everybody else and sweat through it and stuff. And everyone looks so natural and comfortable. So I'm just going to wing it. There's no facts, figures, graphs, or footnotes here. It's just a bunch of pictures and talking about what we're doing here in the Arctic for gardening. First, I want to acknowledge that gardening is just another supplement, complement to, growing healthy, happy communities, and also supplements our hunters, fishers, gatherers, and growers up here in our region. So we don't want anyone to become gardeners unless they want to. So people go, "Oh, we're not gardeners, we're hunters and fishers." I go, "Yeah, but you're also doctors and lawyers and engineers, so why not gardeners too?" So let's just diversify our skill base and our experience and our knowledge for the betterment of all. So that's my little spiel there. And I figure you guys are here because you want to know about how we garden in the Arctic. And it does vary from coast to inland or upriver. It varies from here on the coast in camp versus in town. In town, we don't have to worry about bears, but we do have bunnies and little groundhog kind of things. So we have our different situations. We have sometimes musk ox that come into town. So it's different. And so I'm going to talk about what we're doing here in Cooperative and more recently in my job here at Chachi College campus. And, how we started gardening back in 2010, I started gardening. Had a variety of different efforts going along to expose people to more gardening, to encourage them to garden and grow more of their own food. And this year with college, we wanted to launch a particular community garden project. So even though it says launching a community garden, we've been trying to publicize, promote community gardening for a while, but this year we really wanted to have a community garden project that produced a wow, showcase garden and have workshops throughout the season so we could have people come in and see the garden as it progressed and answer the questions. And of course, as we know, that didn't happen. We had to adjust for a pandemic, but that is also an opportunity. So I'm just going to get into this because I have a lot of cool pictures I wanted to share and show off about gardening here in Cooperative. So next slide. So where's Cooperative? So you can see Anchorage at the bottom there. And then up at the top, I circled Cooperative. And sometimes we actually can see Russia from our backyard. But anyway, here's Nome. So we're across the Seward Peninsula. And if you look at it, it looks like there's an island, but it's really just almost an island. And the next picture, you'll see where the Baldwin Peninsula, and here's a little bitty old Cooperative, and which is a tiny little hair of a land strip where the Arctic Circle crosses. And Kikiktiguk, which is the original name for Cooperative, actually means almost an island. You can see here's a little tiny town, and here's the other part of Solik and that place. I'm sorry, Solik's over here. But in this little tiny town, it used to be, of course, natural tundra, berries, plants, etc. And of course, humans came in and we overbuilt it and everything and filled in stuff. And so we're just trying to recreate more garden space, more green space in town. And in some ways, with our native plant garden at the campus, revegetate town, a little piece of town, and reconstruct, restore some native habitat. So this is the campus in Breakup, and that's the courthouse, which is also the Armory building. And this is the part of the Chachi campus building. And on this side is a native plant area under snow. And this is a basin that fills up with obviously water when we have spring breakup. On the other side, you can't see it here, because we have the food demonstration garden. And so you want to start simple. It doesn't happen overnight, nor in one season. And if you build it, they will come, right? Not. So we had great community support. People volunteered to build those boxes. We got the local construction company who's been a wonderful advocate and supporter of my gardening efforts over the years. He brought in a truckload of dirt that we could use to amend and create our garden spaces. We got tires donated to the local place that collects tires. I said, do you have some that you could donate for our garden? He goes, yeah. How many do you want? I said, 8. He goes, 8? I go, why is that too much, too little? He goes, we've got like 200. I go, no, I just need 8 for my potato planters. But anyway, so they brought over 8 tires and we started to plant potatoes in those. And then the first year we got a donation and we got these transplants from wonderful Rissy's Greenhouse, which helps us with our annual community plant sale up here. Another way to expose people to gardening and growing and enjoying beautiful fresh greens. And also the annual community plant sale was an effort to beautify the community. And this is the first year we haven't had it since 2015. So gardening is not a group sport. People garden for a number of wonderful, beneficial, practical reasons, including we all have to eat. It's spending time with a lot of other people is not one of the reasons people garden. People may share the joy of gardening, but they prefer to garden alone or with family or friends. And I'm the same way. I love having people in my garden. I love having kids in my garden. But at some point, I just love gardening by myself for all the wonderful reasons that we've talked about in this conference and more. The gardening is meditative, it's relaxing, and it's often a solitary pursuit. Now with kids, it doesn't matter. And that's the good part about community gardening efforts. So we wanted to partner. So where do you get the kids? Boys and Girls Club. And luckily, Boys and Girls Club has so many opportunities to involve gardening, healthy food, outdoor activity. So I've been partnering with 3 different Boys and Girls Club directors now over the last 5-6 years. And they send over a variety of kids from little elementary school age all the way up to middle school kids. And they come twice a week for a few hours a session, and we do all kinds of stuff. We garden, we weed, we look at stuff, we taste things that are growing, and they're just fun to be with. We take little magnifying glasses and go around and look at things. It's been a wonderful partnership. And we did a rock painting class with the Boys and Girls Club, and those rocks at the bottom are in my office right now. We were supposed to spread them around and place them in the garden this summer, so we'll do that next year, hopefully. But they had fun doing that, and it was just a blast. And again, here for one of the sessions where they came over, I was working on a composting project at the college, and we had all this overgrowth vegetation, and so the kids helped to pull and dig up and weed and gather, and they were just so excited. So partnering and building on what is already working was another key thing to launching community garden and this particular project. Here, of course, we're learning to make compost. And don't be afraid to ask teenagers. They're just big kids. They want a chance to do good and have fun and then be recognized for it. So these kids, the little girl here, she's like 15 or 14, but she was 6 years old when she first came to my garden years ago. And she and the other kids hang out on the back deck of the college where my office is, outside my office, because there's Wi-Fi there. So they have their phones and Wi-Fi. And I was out there needing to do some painting. I thought, oh boy. And these girls were there. And I said, hey, girls, do you want to paint? And they were all like, yeah, man, let's paint. So I got the brushes out, got cloths out, and they just had a blast. And we spent hours just sitting there quietly painting and laughing and joking. It was just so much fun. And also, too, I love my kids. And when they grow up, I lose track of them because they're, into their girlfriends and boys and whatever, and walking around town, not hanging out in the garden with the old lady. So, but anyway, it's also true that kids are less likely to harm something they help create. And this has been proven to me over and over again with mischief makers in the garden who become wonderful garden allies and good kids, at least when they're around me. And also recruiting volunteers. So I periodically recruit volunteers. I don't know where it came from, but I've got over 125 people on an email list that I do and send out different things. And so I did a call out with friends and on the email that we're doing this composting project. And this is just one of the projects that I do. And people came out over several days with the families, some friends, new people in town, visitors, tourists, and they all helped chop vegetables. And the amazing thing about this was we finally got the AFES store to allow us to divert some of their food waste to our garden project. And before in the past, they didn't really want to do that because they said that, oh, people will start eating of the produce and then they won't come shopping in the store. I'm like, the same people that eat out of the garbage are not the same people that go to the store and buy your food, but that's another story. But when I had the kids there with Boys and Girls Club, we chopped some of the vegetables. When I'd open a box of this produce that was discarded, the kids' eyes were like, oh my God, I could eat that. Can I take this home? And I'm like, oh gosh, I so want you to take it home, but if you get sick, I'm going to be in such big problems. And then the store will find out, and no, you can't take it home. It really opened their eyes to the amount of food that is wasted in our area, and God knows around the world and across the United States. And the beauty of it was that we don't have to waste this food. I was showing them how we can take it, and it's kind of slimy, and kids love slime. They put their hands in the stuff. It was warm because it had been in the sun. It was turned to compost and all the good stuff. But kids are just great. They're just not afraid of anything. And they cut stuff up. We put it in that bin you see here, and they help turn it, and we put shredded paper in there. It was a wonderful experience for everybody. And again, volunteers being a part of something bigger than yourself. We lost a little girl, Ashley, a few years back in September 2018. And at that same time, there was a construction project going on where they were going to uproot just a bazillion wild iris plants. And I asked the construction guy again, could we have them? And so he brought them over in a big dump truck, a big loader thingy. And he dropped it off. I thought, oh, great. And I've got these big honking 50, 100-pound clumps of dirt with irises and stuff in them. So I did another call out. And it started with this small group here, some girlfriends and some kids who wandered by. And that's usually how it happens. They see you doing something, and then it's like a magnet. What are you doing? What are you doing? It looks like fun. Can I have a shovel? And so they started doing that. And then more kids started showing up, and more kids started showing up. So we worked together to create Ashley's Garden. And then more people showed up, families showed up. We did a family fair. There's parents with their kids and cousins. And this woman here who's pointing out, she is like trying to organize and tell people what to do. And she's really good. She's a riot, but she's a lot of fun. And of course, I was also trying to coordinate things and make things happen. I put them here, plant them here, do this, do that, to make a nice garden area. But when you have like a bunch of kids, and this is just a small picture, we had days of people coming out and helping with this, but they all had fun. It became a community affair. And it was just really gratifying to see all these people coming out to create this space for Ashley's Garden. And anyway, so at the end, I said, you know, whatever they do, it'll be fine. And so it turned out to be this joyful mess. It was like, you know, it'll be okay. It looks like heck, but we had fun. People got to participate, came out for a good cause, got to be together. We just loved sharing and just being together. It was wonderful. And I thought, what the hell? It'll be fine. And then it turned into this amazing, gorgeous field of wild irises. We got a bench donated for the garden. And you can see a little bit of the remnants of Chukchi Lake over there. It was just beautiful. And so in the end, yes, it all worked out just fine. And so you have irises. And as part of the native plant garden, we had a native plant safari one year and went out, got permission to harvest native plants. And with some volunteer botanists and other volunteers, we transplanted them into our native plant garden. And we showcased different plants we wanted people to be able to identify and understand and just highlight in the native plant garden. And this fall, it's just this fall actually, irises come and go usually about midsummer, excuse me. And in this fall, I was just shocked and amazed to see these late blooming irises. It was like a gift. It was almost like I was telling people, as if Ashley was saying that, you know, she's still here. She still loves being in the garden. So it was a beautiful gift from nature and from who knows where. And then you want to involve the school. We had field trips. And this is one of the times when you want to ask forgiveness and not permission. So because of COVID, we canceled a lot of workshops and stuff. I had so wanted to we had talked about and planned to do gardening stuff with school because they have a cooking class. We wanted a cooking class field trip to come out, harvest the vegetables, identify stuff, talk about gardening and growing, and then go to the school and cook your own vegetables and make your own meals. And that didn't happen. And so the director said, I guess I'm not going to have field trips this year. I didn't respond to her email, but instead I emailed the school principal, who's a friend of mine, elementary school, and I said, what do you think? She said, well, I'm all for it. We can do distance. It's outside. We can wear masks. She goes, let me ask the teachers. And so several teachers said, yeah, bring it on. We are so excited. So we set the ground rules, you know, no more than 4 or 5 kids, the distance, blah, blah, blah. And they came out and we had a blast. It was wonderful. It's like, I guess, early fall time, early September maybe. And of course, we created experiences. So with each garden box, it was harvestable. The kids tasted the greens that were out there. They learned how to eat the flowers. When all the greens go to flower, they can eat the yellow flowers. And the seeds were starting to be produced. I was showing them seed pods. And of course, the highlight was being able to pick a carrot and a potato. So each kid got one-on-one as we showed them how to look for and harvest carrots and potatoes. And of course, involved the teachers. The teacher, she lives in town, grew up in town, and has never gardened. And the teachers and aides were as excited or more excited than the students, asking all kinds of questions. And at least 2 or 3 of them want to garden next summer. So that was so exciting. And of course, that means more bridges into the classroom to do more gardening related education and awareness. And some were gardeners, some eager to learn, and they all wanted to do more field trips or classroom activities. And we talked about summer school with a garden. So I'm excited if that actually comes to pass. Again, partner, be surprised. We had a group of, when we were first getting the garden started, you can see it's pretty bare, pretty naked. We had these youth conservation kids come in, and I got to have them for a few weeks. The first summer we did this, and they were amazing. They're high school kids with a college student supervisor, and they brought in all those rocks you see to create these beautiful garden paths, because the vision is to have plants and stuff growing all around them, but have a pathway through and among the garden, the pad for maybe, you know, music or other, central activities. But Chuck Tree is also home to our local library, and we have a giveaway book section in the lobby area or the anteroom area, which we call Connie Chuck, the Arctic Entry. And so these kids were weeding, and of course, weeding's pretty boring. And so they decided they would pick the craziest book they could find in the free book pile, and one of them would read, and the rest of them would listen and garden and weed. It was so fun if they were weeding in the garden. And there's a boardwalk here, you can't hardly see it, that leads to the library. And during the days that they did this, it was amazing. Kids and community members who were coming in out of the library would stop, sit down the boardwalk, or stand and gaze and spend time while these weeding in the garden activities were going on. It was a very peaceful, just a beautiful moment. It just gave me ideas of things that we could do in the garden that would really, bring the community together and, connect with the nature and with each other. We created backyard habitat, so that bare ground you saw on the previous slide is now this lush, wild, strong vegetation of native and wild plants. And you see a little bird here, a little duck. So as the season goes on, the waterfowl and birds come and hang out here. It's wonderful. And here you can see little rafts that when we have Chukchi Lake in springtime, the kids come out and raft to Chukchi Lake. So it's a nice gathering place for all kinds of cool things. We planted wild plants, bluebells, beach peas, coltsfoot, and so many more. Sourdock, hugely popular. I love collecting sourdock. And of course, we had that wildflower patch for a showpiece to bring people in, because the garden itself is pretty green, but this adds color. And make it a sibling affair. So these are kids that come to my garden, and they followed me to the campus one time, and I had them help me weed. And you can see they're pulling all these horsetails, and sitting up on top of the pile of horsetails they collected. It was so much fun. And I have a friend from the village, and she lives in town. She's trying to do a garden back in the village, and her granddaughter came to visit, so I gave them a tour like I always do to anybody who wants one. And we went to the native plant garden, the food plant garden, and we went through all different plants, how you eat them, how you grow them, identifying things. It's just wonderful. And these two kids here, one of them was in one of the class field trips. He had so much fun. He asked his mom and me if he could come back later with his brother and pick some more potato. He said, sure, come on over. And same with these little girls, only one was in the class. And she asked her mom and me if she could come back. I said, sure, bring it on, wear a mask. And they had a blast also. And the fun thing too is when they were done, they left. I was gardening back there. And then they came back and said, can we stay here and play some more? I said, heck yeah. And so they had a great time, and they just played and just putzed around and sampled things and just played games. And they only left when they had to go to the bathroom, because we can't live in the building. And so the big push for this year's community garden project was to offer hands-on workshops throughout the summer. We got to our soil prep and fluff. We did our planting seeds and starts. We got to our thinning, and then we stopped. But it was so good, because we were able to reach out to people in person and have hands-on experiences and ask tons of questions. They were asking tons of questions. We had lots of answers. And I hadn't done this before because I don't consider myself a gardening expert. And so I had Seth Kantner and Stacy Glaser. They came out and led the workshops, and it was really a lot of fun. Seth Kantner's a writer. You might have heard of him. And he grew up in the village, of course, off in camp and everything. So they were really instrumental in helping us get the garden started. And I followed up with other stuff, outreach. So with COVID, workshops were canceled, but we had to adjust. And so if they couldn't come to us in groups, I invited them to come one-on-one to visit the gardens, and it was a huge success. They came with their families or kids or spouses and asked all kinds of questions. And of course, being a geek, I made them tour the native plant garden with me, plus the food garden. And then I also invited myself to their garden, and I hadn't done that before. I kind of felt like intrusive, and who was I to go to someone's garden and give them advice? I mean, I've been gardening, but what do I know? But I went to their garden, and they loved it. They were so happy to have someone come and give their garden personal attention and appreciation and tips and advice. And I learned so much from what they were doing. And at least two people who didn't have a garden, I went to look at their garden space and area and was able to give them some good advice on how to get started, and definitely want to work with them more next year. And I learned, again, they were doing so many cool things that I hadn't even thought about. So it was such a wonderful mutual learning experience. And of course, we all shared our love and joy of gardening. And then I invited gardeners to tour my garden and greenhouse and native plant garden. So So we sampled herbs, vegetables, flowers. I gave out cuttings and seedlings. And again, just wonderful activity and sharing. And they brought their kids and just had a blast. And I met with the gardens more than once, developed relationships. We all enjoyed learning from each other. And we just shared that joy of gardening and harvesting food. And I so want to do more of this next year. So don't give up, learn from your mistakes. Excuse me. So one of the garden boxes had this beautiful cabbage and beautiful bok choy. And then with birds and one incident of vandalism that disappeared, I was just devastated. This thing was ripped off, beheaded. I was like, oh, so devastated. But I thought, what the heck, I'm going to keep growing. I planted some arugula and stuff and kept watering this thing. And oh my God, this better than before cabbage grew up. Nice tight head, and even I've never seen this before, never heard it before, little baby cabbage sprouts. We had like 4 of them. It was amazing. But I also learned that these great leaves catch water and direct it to the plant also make for really soggy conditions for babies. So they started to rot and get soggy. So I was able to salvage a few of them, a couple of them before they all went to pot. But I was just so amazed. The things you learn by gardening. So welcome people, trust, be aware. We have put in cameras and mostly it's for outreach. I figure if we can find out who is in there doing whatever they're doing in the garden that isn't appropriate, I can find them, reach out to them and invite them in. And don't say, I saw you on camera. Just simply say, hey, I was wondering if you want to spend some time with me in the garden, work with me, I'm doing X, Y, Z, I'd love to have you. And the 2 times I've actually tried that, it's actually worked really well. So marketing, outreach, and awareness. So this is our garden in full bore. It's just glorious back there behind building. The camera keeps shaking because I have an old-fashioned camera. It's actually scotch taped to my video screen. So when I move, it moves with me. But anyway, just different things were going on in the garden. It's beautiful, great showpiece. It succeeded in attracting people and exposing people to what gardens can look like and how easy it is to garden and grow things without a greenhouse. So I've been a consistent visible garden advocate for over 10 years now here in Cooperative, and I've been organizing community plant sales with others. I keep out, again, with emails. I keep people informed. I do Facebook posts sometimes. I'm not big on all that technology. I'm really an email kind of person or a phone call kind of person or face-to-face person. But we've developed a lot of good relationships through this ongoing, consistent, massive communication. And I always apologize people and let them know they can always get off my garden list if they ever want to, and nobody ever has. Outreach to kids, caring, consistent, enlist the help of mischief makers. Kids grow up in the garden, around the garden. They take pride in teaching newcomers to the garden as they age out. Age 12 is usually the maximum. Their younger siblings will grow up in the garden, and then that draws in parents and neighbors. I'm gardening, kids pass by with their parents, they're all walking around town, and they go, oh, Miss Annabelle, I'll meet the parents, I invite them to the garden. So next year I'm really gonna follow up with that and actually follow them home and garden with them if that's what they want. And so real quick, in the 2 seconds I have left, secret garden tour of Cooperative. And this is just some of the pictures of gardening in Cooperative. Growing things from seed. Most of this is from seed. These pansies have a special story. This is in 2018, I think it was. I forget what year it was. But anyway, I did not plant any of these pansies. They reseeded themselves and grew up in a box that I have in the ground. You can see in the ground that it's growing up out of the ground. It's disgusting hard gravel stuff. And I transplanted them into the pallet garden, and it was just glorious. And so it happened again this year. So I'm just loving this, reseeding stuff. And we get lots of people and kids in the garden. These are all some of my beautiful little kids. I love them. They're so much fun. And of course, we even get bunnies. I watched him from my window and thought, what's he gonna do? And he kind of sniffed, too much trouble, and went on his way. But it was just too funny. And this, of course, this is my planter bed frame with potatoes, wild iris, wild daisies, chamomile, chamomile. Homegrown, people grow these things from seed. These are supposed to be cherry tomatoes, but look how big that cherry tomato got in my greenhouse. Some of the harvest. This is a cabbage that split. I was visiting a home garden. I said, did you cut that section out? She goes, no, it just split. So I found out about why cabbages split. We had rainbow carrots. I talked with the kids and families about edible plants. I shared this in my email. the pansies are edible, and I went and made some fresh spring rolls with these beautiful flowers. It was glorious and it tasted wonderful, not because of pansies, but they sure looked pretty. And then some of the greenhouses, my friend made a little greenhouse area so she can sit, pretend she's in Florida when it gets nice and hot. And this is how she arranged her greenhouse. And it's just a collage of my yard, a close-up of these daisies that I grew from seed, this like a chaos kind of garden. I love that concept. Some of the hanging plants that I've grown from seed in my garden, greenhouse, and just different kinds of gardening people do in town, which, like I said, is a secret garden trick because you don't see this from the street. And I discovered what a forget-me-not looked like. It was just amazing. This tiny little precious forget-me-not. And I've got a whole field of them. And again, we went crazy over wildflowers last year. And so this is somebody with their drying tent with a bunch of wildflower seeds that we handed out at our community plant sale. And this is our lovely sourdough in situ, on site, in the field, in the tundra behind town. One of my favorite collecting spots. I hope it's a secret. And then, of course, my favorite, I want to really get through this, growing the next generation. This is just a collage of all the wonderful, gorgeous, beautiful, exquisite kids that come in my garden. And this little face here is Ashley. So my heart breaks and just joyful when I see this picture. These kids are just amazing. This is kids 1 year, and this is the next year. You can see how they've grown up. It's just so much fun. I just love it. And again, these kids, I love my kids. They're so adorable and they have so much fun. And it's just so wonderful to surprise with their imagination. They're so active. They're so curious. I just love it. And more kids, just more kids. Bring them on. We have so much fun. And these are my garden here. This is Chukchi garden. And I just can't get enough. This is behind my town. This is a story here. I was walking by and these girls go, Annabelle, come look, come look. I said, what you got? No, we're growing a garden like you taught us. And they had taken these plants, these flowers from the tundra and stuck them in some dirt. And I was so touched. It was so adorable. They're just gorgeous, these girls. And it was so cute, this little, whatever they planted in there, in the dirt behind their house. And of course, COVID masks, they helped me with harvesting potatoes and harvesting my worms. They loved harvesting the castings from the worms and everything. It was just too much fun. And these kids, again, they're all over my yard. This is my deck garden above the ground. And kids have learned, they tell each new batch of kids, you have to have permission to go on the deck because you might fall. This is what I've been teaching them, and to hear them echo that to their siblings and friends, it's just hilarious. Anyway, start simple, start with kids, form partnerships, recruit volunteers, involve family and friends, reach out, have a shared vision, build on what's already working. Challenges like COVID are an opportunity. Really, don't give up. Be patient, have faith. If it doesn't work out, try something else, learn as you go. Mentor others one-on-one. Be kind, encouraging, and just be there for them. And learn from each other. And again, I can't stress enough, marketing, ongoing, consistent, massive, keep it out there, keep everyone informed. Go door to door. We can do that here in the community. It might be weird in other places, but here we can actually go door to door. And I really plan to do that next summer. Celebrate successes, make it fun. You can see from all the pictures I've shown you, everyone's just having a blast. And then we're growing the next generation of gardeners, the next generation of hunters, fishers, gatherers, and harvesters. It's all about the kids. And then connecting with others and growing a community, a happy, healthy, strong community. So, ta-da, done. More pictures. I have to share this one. By the way, these again are pansies and violets I did not plant. I transplanted them. They grew back from seed, and I'm just beside myself that they still work. This is part of my own little native plant garden I have in my yard. A purple cauliflower that I grew, exquisite. These Gadesha flowers I grew from seed. And over here, it's crazy. I wanted to grow radishes, a different kind of radish. I'm not really crazy about radishes, but I thought I would try it. I didn't like it, so I just let them grow. And they turned into these amazing flowers that look like cherry blossoms. And it was a showstopper. People would stop by my garden and go, what are you growing? I said, believe it or not, that's a radish. It grew this big old, you can't see, but big old bush tree thing with branches of greens and pink and purple flowers and white flowers. And you could eat the flowers, but then you can't hardly see here, but it formed these beautiful seed pods, and they're edible. And so I would give them out to everybody. So from one radish came this tree of life, tree of giving, tree of information and joy. And so I give them out and have people come over and pick them and harvest, and the kids loved it. And I pickled some, lacto-ferment pickles, and they're wonderful. So anyway, that is my presentation. So I don't know if there's
Wow.
questions or whatever,
Annabelle, congratulations. Wow, that was the most enlightening and uplifting talk. We really thank you for being a presenter. And you said you were I heard you were going to be nervous. You don't like to you put your heart into it. So anyways, we're kind of behind schedule. We have your email address. I think that'd be the best way to connect with you, as long as the internet doesn't go down with the storms and stuff. But yeah, a virtual applause from everyone. Thank you very much. Now, just to let everyone know, we're going to go with Heidi's talk, and that talk will lead us into lunch break. So we're not going to stop at 11:45 as was scheduled, but we're going to make sure that Heidi gets her talk in, and because then we're going to restart again at around 12:15, I believe. It is a Saturday, we need to relax. But Kayana, very good, excellent. It was, yeah. Keep up the great work. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Annabelle. That was such an amazing talk. And yeah, like Brian said, we're a little behind schedule, so I hope nobody felt like eating lunch today. So yeah, if people can stick around, I guess I can go a little over, but I can also try to keep things a little bit shorter. So I'm Heidi Rader. I spoke with Glenna earlier this morning, and I'm an associate professor of extension, and also have served the Tanana Chiefs Conference region as the tribe's extension educator for a number of years now. And it's so cool to see what Annabelle is doing out in Kotzebue. And that's a lot of what I'm going to be talking about too. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so this picture, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but this is one of the first things did, and actually my predecessor did, but kind of helped start a community garden in Nenana. And this is the McManus family, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. But for those of you who were on last night at 5 o'clock, the Native American Agriculture Fund representative talked, and she talked about just all the grants here in Alaska. I was one of the recipients of one of those grants, and part of what we want to do, Renelda talked about this, and we're working with her on this too, but is assess kind of the food and agriculture needs of Alaska Natives throughout the state. And another aspect of that is talking about the tribe's extension program. If any of you guys are familiar with Cooperative Extension Service, a lot of what we do is education. I mean, just like what Annabelle is doing, a lot of people who are participating in this conference are doing. But the really cool thing about the tribe's extension program is that it's tribally driven. But before I get too far into this, I do want to acknowledge the land that I'm on and live, work, and play on. So I acknowledge the Alaska Native Nations, upon whose traditional lands our campuses reside. In Fairbanks, our Chafyetic campus is located on the traditional lands of the Dena people of the lower Tanana River. And I really liked just what Summer talked about this morning too, and kind of acknowledging where we come from and who's taught us. This is me here holding all of the zucchini with my sisters. And of course, my mom taught me to garden. I grew up in Fairbanks with no running water. We watered our garden with rain barrels. And as you can see, it was pretty successful. And one of the things that makes me happiest, just like Annabelle, is sharing with kids. This is my daughter, And I kind of just realized when I shared this picture, this bottom right corner picture, this was in Nenana at the culture camp, and Tim McManus showed us how to make moose head stew, and it really invited her to be a part of that. And I was teaching at a, the culture camp, and we were just a part of it. And so I just realized, how full circle things come. And, I'm learning from the communities that I work with and teach in, and they're teaching me and my family too about using all of the parts of the moose and things like that. So just a really, really amazing experience. And she remembered, she made a lot of memories with that experience too. So, and let's see, this diagram is from Jared Quastanakan Williams. And this is really how I view food, and, in the context of gardening, in the context of gathering, hunting, fishing. There's just so much more to the actual eating part of it. And I think a lot of times some of the USDA policies, some of how our Western thought thinks about it is only just the top of the pyramid, and just the actual nutritional value of it. But there's so much more to it, and whether it's growing it, whether it's gathering it, whether it's fishing, hunting, you're experiencing so much more through all of those processes. You're making memories, you are learning skills, spending time together. And so I really think that's the value. There's so much more value to how you get your food than simply the nutritional value. So that's what I think about when I, comes to workshops, comes to sharing it with my family, comes to sharing it with others. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Tribes Extension Program, just what it is, and then I'm going to talk about it in Tanana Chiefs Conference region, what I've done with my program. But this is a grant-funded program. It's a partnership with a tribe or tribes. In my case, I partner with the Tanana Chiefs Conference Tribal Consortium, so it's 37 tribes. It's a grant-funded program, so it's a federal grant. And then I'm actually faculty with the University of Alaska Fairbanks. So that's sort of the technical requirements of it. But the cool thing about it, I know again on the NAF with Valerie Seagrass last night, she was talking about, how do USDA policies miss the needs of indigenous cultures and tribes? And I think that the Tribes Extension Program has a lot to offer in terms of communicating back to USDA what the needs are and connecting needs with resources that the USDA or whoever has to offer. And, traditionally, cooperative extension has been very rooted in agriculture. But that's the great thing about the Tribes Extension Program, is agriculture can be a part of it, but it doesn't have to be. So if you see kind of these 7 priority areas, I mean, it can be used for cultural and linguistic preservation. But as we saw before, a lot of times that does tie back to food. Adaptation to climate change. These are all huge needs in Alaska. And in case you guys aren't aware, with budget cuts, state budget cuts to the university, the number of extension agents and extension staff and faculty has been declining for a number of years. So this really offers a way to not only increase the number of extension education in your community, but have it be tribally driven as well. And again, just more on kind of what I envision as a healthy food. This is what I envision, like people gathering. This is in Galena, courtesy of Frida Beasley. Just, there's an amazing amount of food, and we talk about food security and how we buy 95% of our food. I don't think that's true. I think it's more, it's not necessarily counting all of this food that we don't buy. That's more of the food that is purchased. Yes, we purchase 95% outside of Alaska, but there's so much going on in terms of gathering, growing our own food that's not necessarily captured in that stat. And this is just kind of a typical garden, I would say, in the villages where I work. It's not necessarily like, it's not necessarily what you might see other areas. It may not be perfectly weeded and watered, but it serves a purpose, and it's a supplement to subsistence activities. This is Archie Holtcheese's smokehouse and his garden. So, he spends a lot of time fishing. He doesn't want to be home weeding and watering all the time, and that's perfectly fine. But what I do try to get away from and promote is replacing some of these foods with garden foods, or whether it's promoting preservation or other activities. And again, growing on the right, you can see lettuce that's grown and is fresh versus organic lettuce that I saw in a store here in Fairbanks, and I know in villages it might even be less fresh than here in Fairbanks. So you guys all know the value of gardening, but do you guys see the full slideshow, or do you see the notes page too?
We see full.
Okay, good. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about just what I do here in the Tanana Chiefs Conference region. And at the end, I have a short survey. And I kind of just want to invite you guys, especially those of you who work with tribes or serve tribes, to think about perhaps collaborating and partnering to have this type of program in your region, and think about whether or not it can help you reach yours and your communities and tribes goals towards any of those that relate to those 7 areas I talked about earlier. So, if I was an extension agent in the lower 48 and in a bigger city, I might have a very small specialty. I might specialize in, I don't know, berry crops, something like that, very specific. In Alaska, I'm especially serving tribes. I really get to teach and explore a lot of different areas according to what folks are interested, as well as what I'm capable of teaching. So one of those areas has been skiing. It's for a number of years, I brought out skiers who sometimes skied with the university, and we skied with the kids in the villages, and we brought out skis. Now there's a great program that I collaborated with. They're called Ski-Coo. They're going all over the villages. But that was one of my passions. It's a healthy activity, and it's something I was able to share with kids. And so I would go in, we'd ski, we'd do some seed starting, we'd garden, just a variety of things. So lots of gardening workshops, lots of food preservation workshops, but it's what the tribes are interested in. I don't just go into a village and say, I want to teach you this. It's, what do you want to learn? One of the programs I started was called the Alaska Growers School. And this is a picture of folks who actually came into town and we did education at a farm called Calypso Farm, and hands-on, as well as complemented with distance delivery. And that was a great project and super collaborative across Cooperative Extension Service, as well as a number of other volunteers and groups. So something else I do every year too is send out seeds to all of the communities and gardeners that request them. And that's given me a good picture too of just how many gardeners are out there. So, you know, people submit surveys and they request a certain amount of seeds, and I'm able to send seeds out for those guys. And we've gone to a situation where we send out bulk seeds to save money, and then the gardeners dole out their own seeds into bags, which I send out as well. But this year it was particularly useful, I think, because we'd already done the order before COVID hit, and you know, a lot of those seed companies sold out in a variety of areas. So, so that I think that's a super valuable project and an easy way to help. And we use BIA agriculture funds to do that. And then ideally, I go out and teach a workshop at the same time when seeds are sent out, or bring them with me and just teach people how to start seeds, that type of thing. So here's some pictures of workshops. And if anyone was on earlier, then I talked a little bit about some of the YouTube videos and things like that I do too. And I also taught virtual workshops where we were actually in the garden on Zoom and people could ask questions as we were going along. Some of the villages, I see Karen was on here at one point, have fairs in their communities. This is one in Galena. And then a giant turnip or rutabaga that Grace Thomas grew. So that's a fun thing for people to do, and you know, just share the bounty and show off. And of course, food preservation is a big one. That's something I do as well. So preserving salmon, moose meat, all pickling, making jam. That's a part of food, you know, increasing food security and harnessing that too. I also teach a super in-depth course. So when I travel and go out into the villages, which I'm not really able to do right now, you know, it's usually just for a day or two. But with the Master Gardener online course, it's a full semester course. And the idea is to train volunteers to then go out and share in their communities, and you know, whether it's helping with a community garden or, you know, teaching people how to garden, like Anchor Gardens was talking about, coaching other people how to garden. That's a part of it too. And let's see, Brian, are you able to share any of the links? I guess I haven't been monitoring the chat at all.
Yes, they were all sent during the earlier talk, but I can dig them up again and repost them.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
If there's something in particular, yeah.
Yeah, like the YouTube one right now.
Okay, well, let me
Would
quiet
be great.
myself and I'll get onto it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. So Brian's going to share with you a link to various YouTube videos, and I've been doing this for a couple years, but of course, in our current situation when a lot of the villages are shut down and I'm not able to travel out, this has just really been a great way to share information and still continue to do outreach. Also write articles for It Grows in Alaska blog, and and the council newsletter, which goes out to the Tanana Chiefs Conference region. And I try to get the word out on, the Tanana Chiefs Conference Facebook page as well. This is a social media campaign I did a while ago. I made about 30 of these graphics and just encouraging people to do things like shop in your backyard, grow a garden. So the purpose of this presentation is really to kind of give you an idea of what the tribe's extension program is, how I've used it, how the Tanana Chiefs Conference region has hopefully benefited from it. And just if you are part of a tribe, serve a tribe, work with a tribe, how might this program benefit you? And Brian, there's a survey link I did email to you. You might have included it in our previous talk, but it was for this talk. And there's a short survey I would just ask you to complete if you're interested in learning more about the tribe's extension program, or possibly interested in maybe starting one for your area. So I should say we have one other tribe's extension program here in Alaska. It's in the Bristol Bay region, and that one is primarily focused on 4-H, which is our youth development program. But it is a grant-funded program, so it's competitive. And like I said, it requires a partnership between a tribe or tribes. And it was a land-grant university. Now it's actually a tribal college. So as Rachel is saying, APU is working on becoming a tribal college. And I'm just going to, so that they are able to partner as well.
Oh, Heidi, the survey is now in the chat. So did you
Oh,
want
great.
people to
So
actually go to it now or look at it later? Go for it.
yeah, so please do go ahead and take that short survey if you have a chance, and particularly if you think this could help you and your tribe reach your goals that have anything to do with food or cultural preservation, any of that kind of thing. And that's there in the link. And it looks like it's almost noon, but if anybody wants to stay for questions and skip their lunch, I will skip mine too. So thank you.
Thanks, Heidi. Yes, since I'm the ultimate closer of of this session, I'm going to let it continue because there's no reason why we need to go to a break. I'm going to leave it open, but realize that we would need to get to the next session at 12:15, and so there's a few minutes here. So maybe I'll just open that up for people. Did you want them to chat or do you want them to write in the chat, Heidi? What's your
please feel free to unmute or write in the chat box. I'm checking.
Okay, well let me do it. So how do I unmute all? Is there a button? Otherwise I have to go one by one.
You could ask all to unmute.
All to unmute. Where?
Oh, I thought people could unmute themselves, but
probably not.
I think we can unmute ourselves, and you probably don't want to unmute, and you
Go,
probably don't want
Darren,
to unmute all.
go!
Yeah, sure thing, Brian. And you probably don't want to unmute all because that could be disturbing potentially.
Okay,
a little
go
loud.
for it. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, yeah. How were you able to unmute? I guess everyone can unmute, right? Okay, so I'm not going to unmute all. If anyone wants to speak, you're just going to have to step on each other, and then go for it. Darren from Juneau.
I didn't actually want the floor. I was just trying to help, but awesome information. Thank you, Heidi.
Thanks, Darren.
Yeah.
Again, the floor is open. Anyone wants to speak? I know it's not fun being on a Zoom call where you're kind of sitting on your hands and your microphone, but let's try this out. If you have something, related to this session would be preferable because there'll be other sessions that there's going to be other discussions, but anything to do, and I can't even remember what the title of the session that I'm monitoring, but if it's dealing with gardening, cooperative extension, I want to see those. I want to see those baby cabbages marketed because I get sick and tired. I'm sorry, Alaska State Fair, that you grow the biggest, enormous thing, but I never hear of anyone actually eating 2,000 pounds. It probably is very tough, but it's probably still edible. I'd like to see us change the conversation around because you see baby bok choy, you see microgreens. Those are go-to products. And I'll tell you, if anyone gets into those kinds of businesses, I think you're going to do quite well. Bigger is not better necessarily when it comes to agriculture. I mean, we got to, I'm just getting on my soapbox. I mean, there is big ag because, we're pushing 7 billion people. But, for our little neck of the woods, let's look at those tender little morsels that come on the ground, because you can imagine how many crops you can turn over if you let's say, broccoli sprouts, or I'm not the ag specialist, but if everyone would do a little bit of that, you could have multiple crops per season too. What's your take on that, Heidi or Darren, or anyone else who has an ag CES background?
Hey, Brian, this is Annabelle. It's funny because I used to look at Brussels sprouts and go, oh, they're just baby cabbages. So there are Brussels sprouts.
Perfect. I love Brussels sprouts.
So this is Jen. I put the note in about Annabelle's comment about her cabbage being ruined and then growing all these multi-sprouts. And we purposefully grow like an early season cabbage that, what is it? It's Stonehead. We grew it as a late season cabbage up north, but down in southeast, we can grow it as an early season cabbage if I start it in April. And we cut off that head and sell it in July, late June, early July, mid July. We kind of have a successional crop going, and then the babies come back, and in the fall we harvest those. I don't really find that they're sellable, but we can make sauerkraut and sell the sauerkraut of them, and people don't know that it wasn't the prime cabbage that went into their sauerkraut. But I haven't tried it with other brassicas. It's an interesting idea.
Oh, thanks for sharing, Jen. That's great. I also see that Kyla Byers wrote in the chat. She sells baby red cabbage in the farm share boxes, and people seem to really like them. Smiley face. And then Jerica Hedger says we're trying tiny bok choy. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else have any experiences with going small? I'm guessing everyone's getting a little bit hungry. We're down to 21 participants, so maybe I'll cut it off in a couple minutes here. Oh, where was this on? Oh, yeah. Jerica says she'll be trying to make tennis ball lettuce next season, mini heads of lettuce, and I can imagine they're not going to taste like tennis balls. Maybe they'll have the nice green color that's associated with them, but great ideas. Let's see. Oh, she also mentioned Little Fingers eggplant. Oh, I didn't know you could do eggplant up here, unless it was in a hoop house or a warm shed someplace. But yeah, and Annabelle puts in, you know, grow small but grow a lot. It's sort of like this. What did we hear from Summer about some particular book? Dig deeper. Go down an inch but go a mile. So can you imagine? We don't have to. That's just my just on it. Sorry, I'm taking up the space here. But now, and the other thing I just noticed, I'm just kind of trying to figure things out. Back on the beets that Glenna was mentioning earlier, I notice when I have purchased a beet, or box of beets from an organic distributor, and then I cut the top off, and then I decided to I put it in a little water. I'm generating these little beet flowers on my windowsill, and I'm like, so I can go either two ways with it. I figure I could clip the leaves and eat them, or I could try to take the decapitated beet stem, I guess, stem with and with the leaves and try to plant that. I tried to do it with carrots. They would do the same kind of thing, but when I put it in the garden, all it did was produce the top and not the bottom. So I'm wondering if anyone's experienced doing that kind of cultivation, because every time I try it with this beet, and of course if I let it go too long in the water, and if I don't change the water, then it molds up and gets decrepit and winds up in the compost pile. But thought I'd toss that out there. If anyone else try to do something with the part that you don't necessarily eat, but you can reroot. I mean, we do the same thing when we take cuttings off of our tomato plants, put them in water, they root up, and you can push them right into soil indoors or a hoop house and continue the growing season. In fact, I still have tomatoes inside the house that are production cherry tomatoes in November. First time for me.
This is Karen Bedoni out in Galena. I think that's a really good point that there's a way that we can utilize parts of the that maybe we don't, we can share that information. And the same with some people presented, I think already at this conference, about ways of using all the parts of salmon that we harvest and just perpetuating that traditional value of really respecting and utilizing every part. I had a friend this summer who was growing a lot of beets, and she doesn't eat beet greens. And so it was really exciting for her to be able to eat all the beet greens, and she could bring them all to us of composting them. So just sharing that information and being creative. And thanks to everyone for your sharing your enthusiasm. I think the relationships that you build in these communities and sharing your enthusiasm is so valuable, so inspiring, and doesn't always get captured in the metrics of how many villages you visited or how many outreach programs you did. But it really matters in the long run. So thanks.
Great, thanks, Karen. And from Galena, which I've never been to, but I've been to Kotzebue, which is a beautiful community. So again, we're very thankful that we were able to pull off this virtual conference, because my guess is that many people would not be able to do the face-to-face. And I think it's it's the way to go in the future, or the other situation you can do face-to-face, as long as there's a hybrid component for those who can't be physically in the room. And I would push strongly for that, because I in a regular year I saved on travel and costs and all that kind of stuff, and I'm talking from my home, as all of you are doing at this conference. And I think we feel bad about what's going on pandemically wise, but we're persisting, we're resilient, and we're communicating, and we're going forward. So